here over on Subscribestar. So Greece, but like totally lame and diverse. Just assume anything that they make, they will destroy. So if you're of a certain age, Greece is something that you probably fondly remember, along with dozens of movies from the 70s and 80s. Even if it was kind of before your time, they were re-showing the stuff in the 80s. It was mostly popular with the girls in the 80s when came on TV, and like you got to imagine TVs back in the 80s. It was not quite the same experience. It came out originally in 1978 and it was hugely popular even in the 80s, but mostly among girls, probably because it was a musical, and for some reason that just doesn't click with guys. Let's take a look at the image of them facing the camera in the 1950s prequel, 1950 prequel Grease, whatever, Rise of the Pink Ladies or something. because why not? So the original was set in 1954. It was just your standard ridiculous Hollywood bit of nonsense based on off a musical set in a high school, a bunch of cars and a musical romance. It was just silly fun. Olivia Newton-John and John Travolta, and Olivia Newton-John was 29 when she played the high school senior, who was probably 18 in the movie, but she pulled it off because she looked 18. And they had John Travolta. They had great chemistry together. It was like a lot of movies during that period of time. It was lightning in a bottle, and there may be a dozen of those types of dumb teen movies that just click with people. Usually, it was had Molly Ringwald in it. She was in a couple of movies of those '80s that were just monster hits. 16 Candles, and shoot, there was another the one where they go to the high school on the Saturday, and there's I forget the name of that movie. Probably someone's gonna know it. Better Off Dead was a classic with John Cusack in it. That still holds up today. You can find that on Odyssey and Bit Chute. It's every once in a while I go back and watch it. Just a great film. There were so many of those movies. What was that Sean Penn one where he plays a surfer or something? Anyway, but the thing is, no, you're not gonna make those movies again. That's probably the movie he's most well known for if you're of a certain age and you follow the 80s movies, but you didn't follow Sean Penn. It's like that's probably the one movie I've ever seen him in, because he didn't bring anything to the table for me. Did it have Judge Reinhold was in that film too? God, what a great flick. The thing is, you're not going to make those movies again today. It's impossible. It's pointless to even try. They were made within a window of time that cannot be recreated, as every single window of time is like that. Just let them go and make something fresh. But of course, as Tolkien says, evil can't create. And the longer and longer you're looking at Hollywood, the more you see that they really legitimately cannot create. They can't do something fresh and new, because when they do and they make something like They Them with the guy who is Kevin Bacon from I want to say from Tremors. I'm sure he's been in better. What was he movie? The movie about dancing. So that was another 80s movies. A stupid 80s movie, some movie about dancing. They have some two guys that are learning how to dance together. You're like, okay, in hindsight, perhaps that's a bit not Dirty Dancing. That was another 80s movie that was God. There was just a ton of this kind of schlocky crap in the 80s, but it was like, well, what did it do? Oh, it entertained you pretty well for 90 minutes. Caddyshack was another good one. I mean, I could name 100 movies from the 80s that like they did what they're supposed to do. Yeah, what's that? Give you 90 minutes in exchange for your money of solid comedy entertainment. Oh, well, why don't they do that nowadays? Well, because they can't do that nowadays. They make something like They Them, which was on Odyssey for a little bit. I saw it. It was a wow. It was a BLT summer camp, and that had Kevin Bacon in it. And nobody watched it because it doesn't connect with anyone. Because it's like, yeah, this is this is the original Pink Ladies. You notice anything different? It doesn't connect with anyone because these chicks were probably in their 20s also. It's like making a movie in 1985, and if everyone was wearing the Michael Jackson jacket with all the zippers and the gloves, it doesn't work because everyone knows it's a fad. Even back then they knew it was a fad, because fads just come and go every 10 years. It's not something you get invested in. Like, everyone understands that things are, that people will get into tropical shirts for a time period. It's like you just ride the wave. In the 90s, people got into like tie-dye t-shirts, and there was like a resurgence of the Doors, probably because that movie came out. But I don't know if the movie started it at all or if the movie just capitalized on it. Anyway, so like Janis Joplin and that kind of the Grateful Dead were kicking around in the I remember in the 90s that was a big resurgence. Anyway, the thing is, deep connected stories are tribal and nationalist. They're not globalist. The found family Marxist stories are astroturfed stories, not grass. Nobody believes that people are going to fight and sacrifice for a group of people that isn't theirs, and that's kind of the main dogma for these found family stories. We're a ragtag group of people who are fighting against all these blonde men who want to maintain a nation and have a nice way of life. Like, yeah, let's destroy all that. Like, what are you going to replace it with? A starvation. Oh, okay, I feel like that's been tried before. The thing is, you can't understand Hollywood or any entertainment today in America without understanding cultural Marxism. Everything they do is propaganda. I mean, it's not just me, some tinfoil hat nut job, saying this stuff. Like, you see the examples before. Oh, hey, they're remaking Wheel of Times or Rings of Power or all the other She-Hulk. It's, oh, this kind of sucks. Oh, how dare you say that? We raise these pox purse puppy shields, and then if you attack the movie, we say, oh, well, you're istophobic because we have a pox purse puppy in the movie. No, it's well maybe, but I mean that's related to it because like you're swapping out characters, but it's also just it's a bad show. It's like the first 5 minutes of all three of those shows, you've got some blonde man being degraded and humiliated on screen. It's like literally the first 5 minutes of all three of those shows. They did that where they did that to a blonde male. It's weird. You know, it's like I just randomly named three shows that came out. It's like that, huh? Like they really did that. Goes back and checks the season 1, episode 1, first 10 minutes of the movie. You're like, holy shit, this weirdo nut job, tinfoil hat, basement dwelling, whatever, living in a Faraday cage, right? Faraday cage lifestyle. Yeah, they're right about that. They really do have this weird fixation with blondes. Maybe you should look into that. Anyway, so as silly as Grease was, and it was fun silly, and which is what stuff did in the 70s and 80s really well. And let's see the difference. What a difference it was. It was still trying to capture a bit of the vibe of 1954, and it roughly took you to that time point. Very roughly. It was just a dumb musical, but it all worked together. And they had a sequel that nobody watched. I don't even know when it came out. It had that chick who was shit. Was she in Batman? Was she in '89 Batman? Was that the lead? Anyway, they had to try to make it cash in on the first success. It didn't really work with a female protagonist. It's like, so what's your goal? It's like I run around sleeping with a bunch of guys. Okay, it's doesn't. It's like the female James Bond. It's not quite the same thing for some reason. But whatever. And it was set in 1958. So now they have a prequel, which is set in 1950. And it's exactly like what you expect. You can watch the preview on YouTube. It's woke. The preview got 700,000 views and 300 likes. It's called the Grease Rise of the Pink Ladies because that was the jacket they wore. So that's the visual connection to the original movie, the Pink Ladies jackets and then the cars. But if it's set in 1950, then the cars have to be from the 40s. Post-war, and actually they're not as stylish. They didn't really get the current really good styles until the early 50s. But it's like somebody made a theory about the Disney Star Wars where you had Rey and she was wearing a limited costume because she was such a forgettable character that they wanted you to remember her no matter what the costume was or something like that. I don't know if that theory holds up, but she was a very forgettable character, as was everyone in that movie. Except now that for the prequel, they swapped out the actors for a mixed high school cast set in 1950s America. Because F you, that's why. You can expect them to remake everything you enjoyed as a kid if you're in your 40s. The Karate Kid, but this time, the funny thing about the Karate Kid and Revenge of the Nerds is the protagonists were dark-haired, in this case Italian, and the antagonists were all blondes or overrepresented by blonde people, both in Karate Kid and Revenge of the Nerds. I mean, you watch that now, it hits a whole different way. They were doing that back then. So I mean, yeah, they'll remake the Karate Kid, but this time the evil blonde kids will be like Neo, Hugo Boss in red MAGA hats, and the Italian kid will be a black kid in a wheelchair, and this is MAGA karate country. I mean, they're probably going to do it to all the films. Pretty in Pink and 16 Candles. It doesn't, like, none of these things which I think were set in the 80s. None of the stuff, which I think I think Grease and Pretty in Pink had two struggle snuggle scenes that were kind of played off as humor. Or there's a song about it. Did she put up a fight? I always remember that line in the song, which is it would have been weird even for any time period. But it's like the people who write these musicals are, degenerates. But in Pretty in Pink, there's a scene where they get drunk and they bang each other. It's like, well, nowadays that just wouldn't be politically correct, but you know, in our days, it's like, yeah, that happened all the time. That's just how babies got born. That's just how people got married. It was like you got drunk and had kids. Um, anyway, like none of these movies will make sense if they do it in the '80s. Like we're gonna swap out the cast and we'll be telling a story of istophobicism. You know, like, so is that really going to be a huge seller? You really think people are on board with that? I mean, it's kind of been heavy-handed a little bit lately. Yeah. It'll be like instead of a Molly Ringwald, it'll be a black family living out in the suburbs in the '80s, and I don't know even what that movie was about. They forget her birthday, but somehow there'll be some kind of like evil blonde guys who are running around the town. They'll be like skinheads or some kind of nonsense. It's like, oh, you just thought you'd work that in there. Weird. Weird. The point is not to make movies that make sense or even sell movies. The point is a humiliation ritual. That they do very well. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you guys all next episode.